Hey guys, tonight we're taking a very sleepy detour into the misty beginnings of Japan, where emperors are born of gods, swords whisper softly, and destiny arrives riding a cloud. You're about to become Emperor Jimmu, or, well, someone a lot like him, Japan's mythical first ruler. The year? Roughly 660 BCE. Give or take a few divine exaggerations. You're cradled in the arms of a mother who might be part goddess. A little intense, right? The weather outside is throwing a full tantrum. Lightning cracking, wind howling, clouds spinning like gossip. In mythology, this usually means something important is being born. And that's you. Sorry, no pressure or anything. The air smells like rain-soaked cedar, and people whisper that your mother, the lovely Toyotama Hime, is the daughter of a sea god. Your father? A dashing descendant of the sun goddess Amaterasu herself. Your family tree is less tree and more divine lightning rod. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're watching from a futon in Sapporo or curled up under a blanket in Barcelona, drop your location and the local time in the comments. I love seeing where everyone's tuning in from. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You, tiny and wriggly and probably confused by thunder, don't cry much. Everyone says that's a sign of greatness. You're quiet, dreamy. The kind of baby who stares at clouds and makes people nervous. You grow up near the coast, where the waves sing lullabies in a tongue only sea creatures understand. Your mother hums along sometimes, like she remembers something deep and finned. You once ask where she came from, and she only says, far below, where the pressure is kind. Not creepy at all, Mom. Historians still argue whether your existence is purely mythological or based on a real chieftain of the Yamato clan. Some claim you're a composite, bits of legend pasted onto a historical leader like glitter on construction paper. But right now, none of that matters. Because your story begins in the realm of shadowy pine forests, where gods still wander, and people bow to rocks just in case. You learn to walk along pebbled beaches, chasing crabs, and occasionally being chased back. You eat seaweed, rice, and grilled fish so fresh, it occasionally flops off the grill. You're taught archery before you lose your baby teeth, and you're always looking up, at cranes, at constellations, at the invisible doorways people say link this world and the next. As a child, you're not told stories, you're expected to remember them. Every tale, every parable, every feud between thunder spirits and river gods. One evening, your father takes you up a cliff. The sky is turning to ink, and the stars are popping out like fireflies. He points to the horizon and says, "One day you'll walk until the sky bows to you." You blink. You were hoping for a snack, but okay. Sky bowing sounds ambitious. You ask him, "Why me?" He doesn't answer. He just hands you a small dagger shaped like a crane's beak. "You'll need this," which is never comforting. You practice sword forms in the yard, your feet crunching gravel. You bow to the rising sun and offer rice to the gods of breakfast. Sometimes, when no one's watching, you talk to your dagger, not because you expect a reply, but because it seems rude not to. When your voice changes, so does your fate. You're told you're ready to travel inland, to seek a land of flat plains and tame rivers, a land with fewer monsters. Maybe. You're not sure you believe that. One morning, a priest in robes that smell faintly of smoke tells you, "You were born beneath a storm to calm the land," which is poetic, but also feels like a lot of responsibility for someone who still stumbles over his sandals. Still, you're Emperor Jimmu. Well, one day. For now, you're just a boy with royal blood, divine relatives, and the lingering scent of sea salt in your dreams. And while no modern archaeologist has ever dug up a birth certificate with your name on it, the Kojiki and Nihon Shoki, Japan's ancient chronicles, say your divine lineage is fact. Mostly. Kind of. Probably. The important thing is, your story has begun. You've been born into a world that doesn't yet call itself Japan, a land of warring tribes, whispered legends, and fog-covered mountains where even the trees gossip. But none of that worries you. Yet. You still have years before the throne, before the armies, before the slightly magical birds show up with good advice. For now, you're still wandering tide pools, humming with your eyes closed, and pretending not to be completely terrified of destiny. You're a little older now. Though time flows strangely in stories like this, days melt into years like candle wax. And before you know it, you're learning how to steer a boat long before you learn how to sit still. Because your dad? He's kind of a big deal. His name is Ugaya Fukiaezu, which, yes, is a mouthful. Even in ancient Japanese, people mostly just call him the Sea Prince, or that guy who fought the giant snake. And he really did. Or so they say. The legend goes that your great-great-uncle slew an 8-headed serpent with a blade that fell from heaven. So at this point, your whole family line is less relatable humans and more divine action figures. Your dad doesn't talk much about the monster. He just says it smelled like old mushrooms and thunder, and then looks at the sea for a long time. But he does like boats. He teaches you how to read tides, how to untangle fish nets without cursing, a true skill, and how to sing to the wind until it changes direction. The boat you travel in isn't large. It creaks like an old man's knees and leaks just enough to be exciting. But it holds you, your father, and a couple of grumbling oarsmen who chew on dried persimmons and complain about ghosts in the fog. You get used to waking up to mist, the sort that clings to your eyelashes and tastes like salt when you breathe too deeply. One morning your father points to a string of islands on the horizon. That's where we're going, he says, which is helpful. Except there are dozens of islands and he's pointing vaguely at all of them. You nod and pretend to know what he means. You stop at small fishing villages tucked into coves, where people bow to you but won't meet your eyes. They whisper that you're part god. One kid pokes you in the arm to see if you bleed gold. You do not. You bleed like someone who bumped into a sharp oyster shell, because you did. At night, you sit on the deck wrapped in fur, watching the stars bounce in the waves. Your dad tells you stories about your ancestor, Ninigi, who was sent down from the heavens with 3 sacred treasures, a mirror, a jewel, and a sword. All symbols, your father explains, of what it means to rule with truth, wisdom, and strength. You ask if snacks count as a 4th treasure. He laughs, which means yes. Historians still argue whether these journeys were symbolic metaphors for the migration of the Yamato people, or if someone actually did zigzag through the Japanese archipelago on a God-blessed road trip. Some even think Jimmu was a title, not a name, passed down like a particularly confusing family recipe. Either way, you're out here, salt-stung and sun-drowsy, learning the ropes, literally. You know how to tie knots your tutor never taught you. You can gut a fish with your eyes closed. You once patched a torn sail using nothing but... There's a moment, just one, when a storm rolls in so quickly that the ocean turns black and the wind feels like a living thing trying to knock your ears off. You brace against the mast, shouting to your father, but he's just standing there, arms outstretched, eyes closed, whispering in some language you don't recognize. Lightning forks down, not near you, not even scarily close, but just enough to make you feel very, very mortal. And then the wind dies, just stops, like someone hit pause. The sea calms, the boat steadies. Your father opens his eyes, "You'll do fine," he says, like that was a test you didn't know you were taking. Later, when you ask him about it, he says, "The wind listens if you speak politely." You're not sure if that's wisdom or a weird dad joke. Probably both. One evening, you land on a shore that feels different. The rocks are smoother, the cicadas louder, the trees somehow know your name. You feel it in your chest, like an echo waiting for its first sound. Your father turns to you, placing a hand on your shoulder. "This land," he says, "is yours to know." He doesn't say to rule or to conquer, just to know, which feels heavier somehow. You nod, not because you understand, but because it seems like the right thing to do. You build a fire together. He shows you how to arrange the logs so they collapse gently, feeding the flame like it's a baby bird. You roast rice balls wrapped in kelp, and he tells you the stars are just holes in the sky where the gods peek through. "Don't pick your nose when you sleep," he warns, "or they'll see." It's both folklore and strangely practical advice. That night, you dream of mountains bending to greet you and rivers laying down like dogs at your feet. When you wake, your father is already gone. Just gone. No footprints, no boat, no sound. Only a folded piece of silk left on a rock, and your crane-beak dagger resting beside it. There's no note, no goodbye, just the silence of someone who knows when to leave before you're ready. The villagers say he's returned to the sea, that he walked into the waves at dawn and vanished, not even wet. You stand at the shore for hours, waiting for a sign, a wave, a glint, a snack maybe. Nothing comes. But the dagger gleams a little in the sun, and you feel taller somehow. Not older, just steadier. Like the boat is still beneath you, but now you're steering it alone. Now you're standing ankle-deep in grass that's trying to pretend it isn't full of spiders. The shoreline is behind you, mist curling like steam off a forgotten teacup, and the path ahead wiggles toward a range of blue-gray hills. It's time to go inland. Time to find a throne you didn't exactly apply for, and a destiny you're still trying to pronounce. But of course, nothing's ever that simple. Especially not when you have brothers. You've got a few. 3, to be precise. All with the same dad, all technically part God, and all convinced that they understand the divine plan better than anyone else. Classic sibling energy. One of them, Itsuse, is the eldest and walks like he invented walking. Always first to speak, first to eat, first to make dramatic declarations while standing on cliff edges. He decides, without asking, that he should be emperor. And for a while, you let him think that's true. You're the quiet one, the contemplative one, the one who doesn't say much unless something really needs saying. And when you do speak, it's with the slow certainty of someone who already knows how this story ends. You travel together, all 4 of you, forming the world's least cooperative road trip. Your supplies are wrapped in woven grass packs, your food tastes mostly of damp rice and faint judgment, and everyone has an opinion about which trail leads where. Your brothers bicker over strategy, hunting routes, and the best way to intimidate local chieftains. You just keep walking. Along the way, you meet scattered tribes, some friendly, offering pickled root vegetables and hesitant bows, others less so. One group invites you for dinner and then tries to ambush you with poorly concealed spears. You only escape because one of your brothers sneezes at the exact wrong moment, revealing the trap. Turns out, hay fever saves lives. There's a strange energy in the air. The land feels old and alert. You pass forests so quiet it's like the trees are holding their breath. Birds sometimes follow you for miles, chirping in the exact rhythm of your footsteps. Your crane-beak dagger hums gently when you cross certain rivers. You pretend not to notice. One evening, while camped beneath a canopy of tangled vines, Itsuse makes an announcement. "I've seen the signs," he says, poking the fire with a stick. "The stars favor me. I am the one meant to rule." Your other brothers murmur assent, mostly because they're tired, and this speech happens every third night. You stare at the flames, thinking of your father's silence, of the folded silk, of the way the sea had whispered nothing and everything all at once. You don't argue. You just say, "Then you should lead us through the next valley." It's a rough valley, known for brambles, territorial hornets, and a tribe that still paints its warriors with ash and fish oil. The fighting is quick and loud, and you're all bruised and exhausted by sunset. But only one of you is mortally wounded, Itsuse, struck by a spear thrown from the shadow of a pine. You carry him to a clearing. He's pale, mouth drawn tight with pain. There's no priest, no salve, no divine miracle waiting in the bushes. Just you, his quiet little brother, holding his hand. He chuckles once. "Should have let you lead," he says. "You always knew the right path." You don't cry, not really. You just sit there as the night folds around you like wet cloth, listening to the crickets and wondering whether the gods are watching or merely asleep. Historians still argue whether this part of the story ever happened. Some say the death of Itsuse symbolizes a shift in power from elder brother to younger, from brute strength to quiet cunning. Others think he was written into the tale centuries later, just to give you a reason to finally take charge. Whatever the truth, you bury him beneath a circle of stones. You offer a song, not the kind with lyrics, just a humming, low and full of memories. Your other brothers don't interrupt. From that moment on, everyone turns to you. You don't have to raise your voice, you just nod, and people move. You point, and they walk. You sigh, and someone fetches water. Leadership is weird like that. Once you stop trying to prove it, it arrives fully clothed. The journey continues, a little quieter now. The terrain shifts, mud becomes loam, trees grow taller, the air takes on the scent of plum blossoms and wet bark. You cross into territory where people speak dialects that roll their R's and end every sentence like it's a question. You meet a woman who tells fortunes by listening to river currents. She touches your wrist and says, "You don't sleep well. Too many names in your future." You leave her a bundle of dried seaweed and avoid eye contact for the rest of the day. By now, rumors follow you like shadows. A godchild walks the land, they say. The son of the sea, the brother of thunder. Some villages hang offerings in trees before you arrive. Others shut their gates and pretend not to be home. You don't blame them. Eventually, you reach a wide plain, ringed with mountains like the curve of a sleeping dragon's spine. Your brothers stop. Everyone waits. You kneel and press your hand to the soil. It's warm, like it remembers being part of something bigger. You whisper, "Is this where it begins?" And the wind rustles the grass like a shrug. You stand. "Yes," you say. Not because you're certain, but because someone has to decide. And this time, it's going to be you. You start building. Not a palace, not yet, but something that resembles permanence. A circle of stones for cooking. Reed mats, lashed between poles to keep out the rain. A fire pit, dug low and neat, ringed with shells from a far-off beach. It's not much, but it's the first thing you've made on land that doesn't float away when the tide changes. You don't call it a capital. That would be too bold. It's more like a polite suggestion to the landscape, a way of saying, "Hello, I might be staying a while. Please don't bite." People begin arriving. First, the ones who were already here, the locals whose ancestors etched stories into the hills and tamed these fields long before your great-great-uncle did anything heroic. They're skeptical, rightly so. You tread carefully. You ask before you build. You listen when they explain which rocks not to move and which rivers occasionally talk back. Then come the wanderers, the farmers whose lands were flooded by early summer rains, the hunters who followed deer into your valley and never left. You welcome them, not with trumpets, but with bowls of hot soup and a seat near the fire. Your brothers joke that you're collecting strays. You say you're building a future. Close enough. One afternoon, a group arrives carrying an old man in a sling between two poles. His name is Nagasunehiko, literally, the long-shanked prince. And he's definitely not here for soup. He steps down stiffly, his robes crisp with ceremonial starch, and looks around like he's sizing up furniture. Then he says, quite clearly, "You're not the ruler of this land, I am." Your camp falls silent. Someone drops a gourd. A dog sneezes. You smile. "That's interesting," you say, and mean it, because it is. See, Nagasunehiko is one of those local chieftains who had a pretty sweet deal before you showed up with your divine lineage and decent manners. He's not thrilled about your sudden popularity, and honestly, you understand. No one likes to feel obsolete, especially not the guy with Prince in his name. What follows isn't a war exactly, more of an aggressively awkward territorial disagreement with occasional spear throwing. You try peace first. Always. You send him gifts, dried persimmons, fine cloth, even a lovely comb carved from shell. He returns them all with a note that reads simply, "Try again." So, okay, maybe not a fan of persimmons. Eventually, battle becomes inevitable. And this is where things get messy. You gather your brothers, your allies, your former wanderers, now turned warriors. Everyone sharpens sticks. Someone tries to train a boar. It doesn't go well. The first skirmish You hold your own. Your dagger sings through the air like it remembers being forged from starlight. But your side falters. You're forced to retreat, not in disgrace, but in the sort of frustrated shuffle that says, "Okay, fine, but we're not done here." Historians still argue whether Nagasunehiko was a real figure or an amalgamation of various regional powers resisting the spread of the Yamato dynasty. Some say he was a metaphor for chaos before order. Others think he was just an especially tall guy with an aggressive opinion on borders. Back in camp, licking wounds both literal and metaphorical, you ask your surviving brother, "Why do we fight?" He shrugs. "Because he said no." You nod. That checks out. But deep down, you wonder if maybe this isn't about right or wrong, or even destiny. Maybe it's about belief. His belief that the land is his, and yours that the land is ready for something more, something unified, something peaceful. Eventually, you decide not to charge in again. Instead, you build. Roads, if muddy ones, storage huts for grain, a system of signals using polished metal discs to reflect sunlight from hill to hill. You plant trees that won't fruit for years. People start calling the place Asuka, a name that will mean different things in different centuries. You sit by the fire one night, warming your hands and listening to frogs gossip in the dark. You're tired, not just in the bones, but in the deep corners of your spirit. You wonder how your father handled all of this. Then you remember, he left. Smart man. Still, you stay. And in the staying, you become something else. Not just the youngest brother, not just the sea-born boy, but a figure others lean toward. Not because you shout the loudest, but because you hold still long enough for the world to settle around you. One morning, a young girl from a nearby hamlet brings you a gift. a branch of cherry blossom she carried for miles. For the emperor, she says shyly. You look around, just to be sure she means you. When no one else steps forward, you take the blossoms, bow low, and whisper, "Thank you." She beams. The petals tremble in your hand like they're not sure they've earned this much attention. You place them in water beside your fire, and from then on the people begin calling you by a new name. A name that means divine might and benevolent will. A name that will echo long after you're asleep beneath the earth. But not just yet. The rain comes before dawn. Soft at first, like a forgotten lullaby tapping on leaves and tent cloth. Then heavier, more insistent, as if the sky has finally remembered that it has opinions. You wake to the sound of dripping, the smell of damp thatch, and the unmistakable sensation of one foot soaking slowly in a puddle. Welcome to leadership. You sit up, brush stray pine needles from your robe, and squint into the gray. A runner approaches, barefoot and panting, holding something between his palms, like it's alive. He kneels, offers the object. It's a fragment of spearhead, notched and ancient, found at the border. The scouts say, "It wasn't there yesterday. This is not a good sign." It means Nagasunahiko is stirring again, rattling his chains, reasserting his claim. Maybe he heard about the roads you've been paving, or the granaries you've been filling. Or maybe he just doesn't like cherry blossoms. Either way, the long-legged prince isn't done with you yet. You gather your advisors, your surviving brother, now grizzled and wise, plus a priest who mostly smells of incense and salted fish. There's also Kiko, the one who figured out how to dry sweet potatoes so they last all winter. Everyone agrees. She's the real power here. They want to strike first, catch him off guard, show strength. You sip bitter tea and say nothing for a long moment. Then you nod, just once. This time, you'll go personally. The march is wet and quiet. The rain never stops. Mud sucks at your sandals. Your army, such as it is, slogs behind you in cloaks patched with leaves, spirits rising and falling, with every bent tree or sudden crow call. You pass landmarks that weren't there before, new shrines, carved hurriedly into stone, offerings left in bowls, rice, fish, and once, curiously, a single sandal with a daikon stuffed inside. You don't ask. Eventually, you reach the battlefield. Not a valley or open plain this time, but a forest. Thick, dripping, echoing with the creak of bamboo. It's a terrible place to fight. Excellent for losing things, like direction or limbs. You take your position. Nagasunahiko arrives with fewer men than expected. His banner is crooked, his armor is mismatched, but his eyes are sharp as ever, like someone who's already counted how many people he's willing to lose. He raises a hand, and, in a surprising turn of events, he speaks. "No more fighting," he says. "Let the gods decide." You blink. Several of your men do double takes. The priest chokes slightly on a pickled plum. Turns out, Nagasunahiko. The next morning, you meet at dawn. 2 circles are drawn in the clearing. Incense is lit. Chanting begins, low, rhythmic, just this side of ominous. Your priest anoints you with sea salt and river mud. Nagasunahiko wears a crown of dried reeds and mutters to a pine cone for several minutes. It's not very impressive, if you're honest. But traditions are weird like that. Then it's your turn. You step into the circle. Close your eyes. Whisper a name that isn't quite yours and yet has always been part of you. You raise your hands and call out, not in words but in rhythm. The heartbeat of waves. The hush of wind over reeds. the silence of stars, and then a breeze. Just a gentle one, nothing dramatic, but it lifts the edges of your robe and stirs the grass around your feet. The incense smoke curls toward you. A bird lands beside the circle and doesn't immediately flee. The crowd murmurs. Nagasunahiko steps forward, frowning. He repeats his ritual, adds a small firework for flair. Nothing happens. He tries again. Still nothing, except now the bird has perched on your shoulder, which is frankly showing off. He scowls, he kneels, he offers you his sword. There's no cheer, no trumpet, just rain and silence and a kind of quiet exhale from the forest. You take the sword, not to keep, but to lay across an altar. Then you offer Nagasunahiko your hand. He hesitates, then takes it. You nod. He nods. The duel is over. Later, around the fire, someone tries to toast you as Emperor Jimmu. You laugh and shake your head. I haven't earned that yet, you say. But the name sticks anyway. That night, you dream of sea foam and pine needles, of footprints that lead forward and never circle backward. The next morning begins the way all legendary eras do, quietly, with a bowl of soup and an awkward meeting about plumbing. You're still damp from yesterday's forest ritual, but now people keep bowing slightly when they pass you, even if it's just to hand over a basket of pickled radishes. You're not just a chieftain now. You're becoming something else, a figure whose decisions will echo through generations, possibly carved into stone, maybe misquoted in school scrolls. And that means you need a palace. Well, a palace in the modest sense. Nothing too shiny. You're still operating on a mostly mud and straw budget, but there's an undeniable pull to establish something permanent, something central, something with just enough grandeur to make visiting emissaries go, maybe we shouldn't invade. The site is chosen, a slope by the river, dry in the rainy season, shaded in the summer. They call it Kashihara, which roughly means the fragrant plain with oak trees. Sounds promising. Smells like wet leaves and ambition. The construction begins with singing. Not work songs exactly, more like chants that help everyone lift in time without throwing out their backs. The beams are hauled into place using a combination of rope, sheer determination, and an alarming number of teenage boys who insist on racing each other while carrying planks twice their height. You oversee from a hillock, sipping barley tea and pretending you aren't worried about someone falling into the latrine pit. They do. Twice. Meanwhile, a priest suggests you start thinking about your throne name, something poetic, lofty, ideally referencing your divine descent. You consider puddle avoider or he who once fought a tree root and lost. But those don't exactly scream imperial gravitas. Eventually, someone proposes Jimmu, from the characters for divine and warrior. You pretend to consider it for a while, then nod as if it just occurred to you. Jimmu it is, you say. It rolls off the tongue. Historians still argue about the exact etymology. Some say it reflects a carefully curated imperial mythology. Others believe it was a later invention, retrofitted to make your reign seem more inevitable. Either way, it's official now. People are weaving it into songs. You also begin the great task of bureaucratizing your people. Yes, bureaucracy, the true sign of civilization. Someone suggests color-coded robes to indicate status. Someone else suggests mandatory rice taxes. A third person, who is immediately promoted, suggests a seasonal calendar based on moon phases and crab migrations. You try your best to stay involved without micromanaging. After all, what's the point of being emperor if you have to personally inspect every goat pen? Instead, you focus on rituals, big ones, small ones, and the weird one that involves dancing with turnips under a full moon. Each ritual reaffirms your connection to the gods, to the land, to the people. Each one is another thread tying you to your role, like a spider slowly webbing itself into place. One particularly cloudy morning, a messenger arrives from the western coast, breathless and wet and very apologetic for tracking mud onto your best mat. He brings news: a volcanic eruption near what we now call Kyushu. Villages have fled inland, crops are gone, there's panic. You don't hesitate. You gather supplies, load carts, send word that food is on the way. You even send a few of your own builders to help with shelter. The people call it your first imperial decree. You call it basic decency, but it changes something. For the first time, people begin thinking of you not just as a local leader or a former island hopper or even a divine heir, but as a national figure, someone who responds to distant cries, who sees beyond the hilltops of Kashihara. You're surprised by how heavy that feels. At night, when the fires die down and the insects take over the soundscape, you sit by the newly completed reflecting pool. It's shallow and slightly crooked, but it's your favorite part of the palace. You can see the stars in it, on clear nights, or at least the less cloudy stars. You think of your brothers, those who made it and those who didn't. You remember their laughter, their arguments, the time one of them tried to woo a crab deity by composing an ode entirely in seafood metaphors. It didn't work. But the crab still visits, sometimes. You miss the sea. You miss the rocking of the boat, the taste of salt in the morning air. But you don't regret coming here. Not anymore. Because something is forming, slowly and unevenly. A nation, yes. A legacy, maybe. But more than that, a story. And you're its first chapter. By now, your name is carried on the wind. Well, technically it's shouted by delivery runners who really wish someone would invent the wheelbarrow. But still, your fame is growing. From snowy mountain villages where people speak in vowels you don't recognize, to humid southern rice paddies where crabs run the footpaths like they own the place, whispers of Emperor Jimmu begin to filter into daily conversation. You're not sure how to feel about that, because fame brings questions, and questions bring scholars, and scholars bring scrolls, lots of scrolls. One particularly enthusiastic academic, he introduces himself as Toko the Scribbler, asks if he can document your entire life story. He already has a draft prepared. It's mostly guesswork and generous assumptions. You were born from light, he says, eyes shining. Possibly in a lotus? No, you reply gently. It was a normal birth. Very loud, very messy. He writes that down anyway, but adds an asterisk next to lotus. The scribes settle into a corner of your palace, creating what they call imperial records. At first, it's flattering. Then it's just noisy. So much ink. So many disagreements about how to spell divine. Historians still debate how much of your reign was documented in real time, and how much was artfully retrofitted centuries later. One theory holds that a large portion was added during the 8th century to legitimize a central government. Another claims your autobiography was dictated while half asleep, possibly after too much fermented plum wine. But either way, the records begin. And while you're being turned into poetry, you've got more practical matters to attend to, like the celestial mirror that just arrived. It's part of a trio: mirror, jewel, sword. Together, they're meant to symbolize your divine right to rule. Also, they look amazing in a well-lit alcove. The mirror is polished to such a high shine that one advisor claims it showed him his past lives. Another just uses it to fix his hair. You're not sure what to believe, but you keep it near the altar. You figure it can't hurt. One night, a storm knocks out a corner of the roof. Well, knocks is generous. It hurls it into the koi pond. As you scramble to move scrolls and sacred turnips out of the rain, a strange calm settles over you, because you realize something. This too will be recorded. Someday, someone will read that Emperor Jimmu once slipped on a wet tile and landed in a basket of dried sardines, and they'll think, ah, he was human after all. The next morning, carpenters are hammering again, and you're holding court, literally, on a mat under a tarp. A farmer has brought a complaint about a neighbor's goat eating ceremonial moss. You try not to smile. You listen carefully, ask questions, nod slowly. You're learning the art of ruling, and with it, the art of not ruling too hard. You realize, slowly, that power doesn't come from shouting commands or standing on hills looking windswept, although it helps. It comes from listening, especially when you don't like what you're hearing. So when a delegation from the northeastern coast arrives, stoic men in thick furs who speak through clenched teeth and refuse to sit, you do your best to meet them halfway. Literally. You walk out to the river and hold council on neutral ground. They're not here to challenge you. Not exactly. But they want assurances that their customs will be respected, their leaders consulted. That they'll be seen not just as tributaries, but as kin. You offer them sake and dried persimmons. Then you nod. You promise them a seat at your seasonal council. You suggest a ceremonial exchange of gifts. They offer a ceremonial bear tooth. You, not to be outdone, offer a jade comb that once belonged to your mother. You both leave satisfied. Word of this river treaty spreads faster than eel oil in hot soup. Other regions send envoys, cautiously optimistic. It's as if your empire is expanding not through conquest, but through consensus. Imagine that. The scribes are thrilled. Emperor Jimmu the Listener, one writes, next to a doodle of you sitting cross-legged under a cherry tree. Eyes closed, surrounded by birds. You keep the doodle. It's not accurate, but it's oddly flattering. That night, you sit beside a reflecting pool again. The stars are out. The mirror glints softly in the moonlight behind you. You wonder what will last longer, your temples, your treaties, or the stories. And then you wonder if it matters. Because right now, there's peace. The crops are good, the people are singing again. You can almost believe the gods are pleased. You close your eyes. A breeze rustles the reeds. Somewhere, a goat sneezes. It's going to be a good year.